So welcome guys to the gut check. I am going to be going over the overlooked gut patterns behind bloating, fatigue, and inconsistent progress. So in case you don't know me, many of you who are already on this call do, but if you are new to me and my space, I'm Coach Diana Leigh. I just mainly go by Diana. Leigh is my middle name. I kind of used it as my business name because I thought I was going to have an identity crisis when I got married. But I am a functional nutrition and metabolism specialist. I have been working in the health and wellness space for now over 10 years. I started off as an in-person trainer. I've been in group fitness for the last 10 years, and I've been online doing my one-on-one coaching for the last 6 years. I identify personally as a type A overachiever, which is why I particularly love working with this type of group of women because I get it. I fully understand what's going on in your brain, how you guys respond to things in the health and wellness space, and I can relate on a super personal level. I am very passionate about helping women fuel for muscle, restore their gut function, and reclaim their cycle. I am super passionate about women's health in general. I know it's been one of those things that's been overlooked in science in the health space over years. We're learning so much more new information that can really help women genuinely, and I love being a part of that. So, a little bit of an introduction to my history, because again, I do feel like I relate to a lot of women and the struggles that they have. Now, one thing I will say is probably a little bit unrelatable about me is I had a six pack probably when I was like 11. I was a competitive gymnast. Fitness has, in essence, always been a part of my life. So I have always been muscular. But despite that, I have also still had struggles with my body. I felt uncomfortable in how I look or how I feel. And so I do understand, while maybe not necessarily losing weight, I understand the struggles that most women go through in their health and wellness journey. Now, after being a competitive gymnast up until the age of 18, I felt a little bit lost. I kind of needed to replace having something that I did day in, day out in a very competitive manner. And so that's where I found fitness. Through most of college, I was pretty much self-taught. I was reading fitness blogs and I was learning how to weight lift on my own. And then I eventually got into CrossFit right around like 2015, a little bit after the peak, but still when it was really big. And I just fell in love with this go hard attitude because that was the kind of person I was. I always lived in extremes, and CrossFit really spoke to that for me. And I also always thought that I just needed to exercise more and eat less, which unfortunately is a trend in the health and fitness space still to this day. And this was absolutely a trap that I fell into in my 20s. So, despite the fact that I was already a thin woman, I was already had muscles, I still was unhappy in my body. I particularly wanted to grow a big butt, so I was still interested in growing glutes back in the day, but I also wanted to stay thin. So I had these very conflicting goals. I never knew how to actually approach them properly. And what I did was I just trained all the time and tried to basically starve myself. So not only was I doing CrossFit about 4 to 5 days a week of high intensity workouts, but I was also running multiple days a week because I was often signing up for things like Tough Mudders and Spartan races and half marathons and 10Ks. And on top of that, I was also a spin instructor. So I was teaching spin classes twice a week. And it's safe to say I never faked it on the bike because I always found it too difficult to do. So I was truly doing it all at that time. And while I was really into fitness and I was also trying to watch what I ate, I thought that I would feel good. I thought that I would be happy in my body, but instead, I was feeling bone deep fatigue. Like I'm talking, I would literally think in my head, I'm so tired, it physically hurts. And as a result, I had a heavy reliance on caffeine just to get throughout the day. At one point, I was working in person in a CrossFit gym. I was the general manager. I was a full-time coach. I was working from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. and you could catch me kicking off with a morning coffee, a mid-morning coffee, and then another afternoon coffee just to get through my evening shift. And so I was really just chugging it down. Anxiety was also an extension of my personality. I feel like anxiety is heavily normalized, and it's not to say that I'm gonna trash it or anything like that, but I truly just thought like, oh, this is how I am, to the point where I had friends one day gift me a hat that said, my anxiety has anxiety. It's laughable and it's funny and it's a joke, but it made me disconnected from what was actually driving my anxiety, which was how I was treating my body ultimately. I constantly had these nagging injuries that were holding me back from what I really wanted to do. I wanted to train hard, but eventually I had to give up running because my knees were hurting. I was in my 20s and I couldn't run anymore further than 2 miles. I found that I couldn't squat properly because I was in pain. And yes, I've had chronic back pain. I've talked about this a lot on my social media. I've had chronic back pain since I was a child in gymnastics, but all of these aches and pains elsewhere kept cropping up and I felt terrible. And I honestly looked at myself and I was like, in my 20s, I shouldn't feel this bad. Like, I'm about to turn into my 30s and then 40s and 50s. And if I feel terrible in my 20s, what does that mean for the rest of my life? So, I would love to say that there was an overnight transformation, but it wasn't overnight at all. I was really truly learning on the go. I started becoming really, really interested in nutrition. So I started getting certified in coaching nutrition and essentially took myself on as my first client. And through each and every certification that I've done in the health and fitness space, I've slowly fixed myself. And now I don't expect you guys to do the same because that is a very expensive way to go about doing it. And again, it's a very long, drawn out process. So instead, I like to share as much of my information that I have learned over the years and my experiences with you guys so that way you can help yourselves or that I can help you in turn. So fast forward to now, I would say I have far more consistent energy. I only drink 1 cup of coffee a day unless I'm giving myself a little treat because I do genuinely love coffee, but I try to keep it at that minimum. I have comfortable and consistent hormonal cycles. I no longer fear my period. I no longer dread it, but actually I've been off hormonal birth control now for a couple years and it's been smooth sailing and also so consistent that I know exactly when it's coming and I know exactly how my body's going to respond. I am working on healing some injuries, but significantly spending less and less time in pain. And I would argue that I feel healthier and happier in my 30s than in my 20s. I truly feel like I've peaked. Maybe not peaked. I hope to continue to peak, but I really do feel better than I did in the years that a lot of people kind of cherish their youth. So I know what a lot of you are thinking and feeling because a lot of the women that I work with, they're not starting from ground zero. In fact, you guys are putting in the effort. You're trying to eat healthier, you're trying to move your body, you are working out. So you're not new to this. But where you're feeling a little bit lost is you feel like I'm doing all of the right things, but I'm not seeing the results that I expect from my efforts. And here's why it gets so confusing because this is kind of, in essence, what your social media feed looks like. It's very contradictory. We have on one side, you're saying you need to be in a calorie deficit, you need to eat less. But on the other side, we've got people saying you're eating too little. On one side, we say we need to eat more protein. On the other side, we're like, you're pushing it, you're eating way too much, right? And you're constantly being given these divisive advice, right? Because everyone's trying to stand out in the space. We're all trying to give you advice that kind of says, hey, this is how you can help yourself, but now you're just getting overwhelmed and confused. And at the end of the day, it's not that this advice is inherently bad. Actually, everything that's up here has an element of truth to it. It just comes down to what is actually appropriate for you and your health and your process. So, where the mismatch is happening is we feel like we're doing all the right things and not seeing results. But what's actually happening is you're doing a lot of the things, but maybe it's without strategy, it's without direction, or it's without consistency, especially if you don't believe in what you're doing. So, maybe you put in effort for a small period of time, you think it's not working. So, you switch to the next thing, thinking this will be the thing that works. And what's right online, again, there's so much great information out there. We have more information than ever before, but it just might not be right for you, or might not be right for you at this time. And we also need to talk about uncovering the root issue. So, you guys have probably heard the words root cause thrown around, and obviously, the gut and hormone conversation is becoming more and more popular. I mean, you're here on a gut health masterclass, but what we have to understand is where I don't like the conversation that's being taken, that's taking place is essentially that we blame our gut health or we blame our hormones, right? I like to take more of an empowered approach to this conversation. So it's not blaming something outside of our control, but rather understanding up until this point, our lifestyle, habits, behaviors, mindsets, and choices that we've made over the years have ultimately culminated into our body's adaptation and whatever hormonal or gut health expression is going on that we're experiencing right now. While I'm not saying it's your fault, I'm simply saying, hey, there are things that we can take from our past to better understand why our body is responding in a certain way, which empowers you because that means your future choices can change how your hormones and your gut responds going forward. So I want you guys to always know that yes, this is part of the conversation. Our hormones and our gut do impact things like fat loss, our ability to build muscle, our energy, how we feel on a day-to-day basis. But these things oftentimes need to be addressed first through often foundational and lifestyle basics, but also then through more intensive protocols as needed. So you're probably going to relate to the presentation ahead if you feel like you're doing everything right, but your body is not responding in the way that you expect, kind of like what I kicked this off with. You also deal with probably bloating, but you just assume it's normal, whether it's attached to your hormonal cycle or it's attached to the food that you eat. Your energy consistently crashes after meals or throughout the day. So if you're not feeling energized, look, life is hard, but you should have energy on a day-to-day basis. Your digestion feels inconsistent. So some days it's fine, some days it's not. You're trying to identify trends to see what's actually setting you off, but you can't figure it out. You've tried cutting out foods, adding supplements, or eating clean, but nothing seems to stick. So you're feeling like you're constantly looking for a solution, but you're not finding anything that actually genuinely helps you. And you've also been told that everything looks normal, but you don't feel normal. So many women that I have worked with have gone looking for answers from their doctor or practitioners. They've done the tests, and at the end of the day, they walk away with either being told that they're normal or a blanket diagnosis of IBS with absolutely no direction to take with that. So before I get into anything, I want to introduce you guys to a client of mine, Mona. She worked with me in the past year. And the reason why I bring her up is because when she came into one-on-one coaching, she actually had no idea that her gut health was an issue. She came to me because she wanted to be a muscle mommy, is what we called it. She had just had her first child within the past year. She was not new to exercising. In fact, I had coached her over the years in group fitness. She was at my CrossFit gym first, then she was at my strength and conditioning gym. So I knew that she knew how to work out. She moved well. She knew how to lift weights. But for her, something wasn't connecting. She wasn't seeing the results that she wanted. So she came into one-on-one coaching. And when we start off with all of my clients, we do a full biofeedback intake. So that way we understand, okay, below the surface, what's going on and what do we need to address first. And what we started to see was that Mona was kind of ranking off the charts. She had quite a few gut symptoms, okay? So what we did was we implemented daily symptom journaling. I like to use this tool to help my clients understand how their body is actually reacting on a day-to-day basis and potentially link it to certain triggers so they can better understand their body. And so we can better understand how to tackle the issue. What she was seeing was she was having frequent bloating after eating, feelings of excessive fullness with normal sized meals, and she was feeling puffy after her meals. And when we also cross-referenced her symptom journal with her food journal, we also noticed that she was frequently reacting to FODMAPs, which is a fermentable carbohydrate, common irritant in cases such as IBS and SIBO in the works. So what we did was we implemented targeted supplements and a gut protocol for her. So this entailed a temporary elimination diet, a gut repair phase, and ultimately through this process, we were able to eliminate all of her digestive symptoms. So after all of this is done, we do a reintroduction, and usually you add food back into your diet, and she was able to tolerate that food. Now, furthermore, when we ultimately put her into a deficit, and she actually used the hand portion method to lose weight, she was seeing consistent weight loss. And that's the thing, is that when you actually tackle your gut health first, your body responds so much better to things like a calorie deficit. So let's get into like, what is gut dysfunction, right? It's like this big scary word. And like Mona, she didn't even know that she had it. So how do we know that there's actually something going on within our gut? So the first thing I want to kind of showcase is IBS is this overarching umbrella term, okay? You've probably heard it thrown around, but it's irritable bowel syndrome. And that's not to say that the things under this umbrella are directly IBS, but rather most women end up getting diagnosed with IBS despite the fact that there might be something else going on. So within this list, you'll also see chronic gut conditions, things like celiac disease, Crohn's disease. These are more lifelong, sometimes require medication for management. But you'll also see things such as chronic infections, which can generate gut dysfunction, or pelvic floor dysfunction, which is often associated with constipation. And most women just kind of overlook that piece. So, really, when women are going to get answers for why their gut feels terrible, they're given this diagnosis of IBS, but sometimes they're denied further testing, or even if they do get further testing, they don't get clearer answers. And then what's up to us, so I don't do diagnosing necessarily, but I do help women better understand what is going on with their gut through a tailored process. So, what does gut dysfunction actually look like? How do you know if your gut health is struggling and needs to be paid attention to a little bit more? So, I do have a list of symptoms here. So, what you're going to see is a variety of symptoms of how your stomach can be responding on a day-to-day basis. For some of you, it might happen from time to time. For others, it might be like, oh no, this happens to me after every single meal. One of the things that I want to point out, because we are about to talk about poop, I'm not afraid to talk about it. We have to talk about it. But I did put up an image of the Bristol stool chart. So most people just have no idea what constipation and diarrhea actually looks like. So I'm going to dive into it just a little bit more. First of all, constipation is known as just not having a bowel movement, but you could also be having a bowel movement and still be constipated. So the type 1, type 2 area is going to also fall under constipation. Usually we have a difficult time passing our stools, or we don't feel like we've fully emptied at the end of our bowel, let's call it a bowel session. And then we've got diarrhea on the flip side. So we're hanging out in the type 5, type 6, type 7 area. So traditionally we see this with much more watery stools. We don't have as much, we don't have as good stool formation. And this can be happening in response to meals, or it can be happening in response to our menstrual cycles, right? So there's multiple factors that can be going on here. Where we really want to primarily be is in the type 3, type 4 range most of the time. I'm not going to say it's going to be all the time because, like I said, sometimes our hormonal cycles can impact our gut motility, so our ability to pass and form stool, but majority of the time we should be hanging out in that area. Other symptoms, kind of like stomach distension or pregnant belly after eating, that's a super common one that if we're bloating in response to meals, we know that something is up. Some of the other ones we might not be as aware of, but now you guys have been made aware of. And I know also with gut symptoms, they can be a little bit embarrassing. They can be hard to talk about. It's kind of like the messy conversation. And so a lot of times by not talking about these things, we do struggle to actually identify, okay, there's something going on with my gut that I need to pay more attention to. So why does this actually happen? Why does gut dysfunction happen? And you're going to see a list of things here. Some of them are on either end of the spectrum. So just know that just because a person is thin and works out doesn't necessarily mean that their gut is in perfect health. But on the flip side too, just because somebody is maybe overweight or seen to be as unhealthy, they might have perfectly fine gut health, right? It impacts each individual based on their own experiences, based on their diet, based on their lifestyle. Stress can be also another major trigger that needs to be acknowledged. So I kind of mentioned here trauma. And if you guys have heard of conversations where we talk about big T trauma and little t trauma, right? You guys don't have to go through a massive traumatic event for your gut health to be a mess. Sometimes it's just a matter of chronic stress happening on a daily basis over long periods of time that can make your gut a little bit upset, excuse me. So these are things to understand is like it's a multifactorial approach. We do have to look at a bunch of different angles. We have to look at your history, so your diet history, your lifestyle history, all of these things that ultimately culminate again into your body's physical adaptations. So let's talk a little bit more about how it actually impacts your process and your results. So first of all, from an energy perspective. So again, we want to make sure that we have steady and consistent energy. And I know that the women that I work with are busting their asses. Like you guys are getting up to go to the gym, where you're fitting it in somewhere in the day, in between going to work, maybe commuting, maybe working from home, but then also juggling like your family, whether it's kids, pets, whatnot. And then on top of it all, you're trying to drink enough water, eat enough fiber, cook meals, all of these things, right? I know that you're busy. And so it might seem normal to be exhausted on a day-to-day basis, but it's really truly not if you feel like your energy levels are so low that it's debilitating for you. So, gut dysfunction often means that poor digestion and absorption, so even meals that are well balanced are seen to be as clean foods and whatnot, they may not translate into usable energy, which can lead to fatigue and brain fog. So, essentially, you don't have the capacity to actually digest that food and utilize the nutrients at 100%. Your chronic gut stress basically keeps your nervous system on high alert. And so, if you think about it this way, if your nervous system is constantly in fight or flight, it's basically ready to kind of like go into a high alert state. That requires a lot of energy. So, if our body is taking that energy to manage that stress in other areas, you're going to have less energy for your day to day energy overall. Disrupted gut brain signaling can also contribute to low mood, anxiety, sleep disruption. So, all of these things then impact your energy later on. Let's also talk about body composition and fat loss because I know for a lot of people, when they actually start on their health and wellness journey, what they're focusing on is weight loss or creating a toned and lean body. Very few people actually start their journey by going, let me look at my gut. But your gut is an integral part in this process. So understanding that dysfunction is a stressor, which can make the body more protective. So think of it this way. If your body is stressed, it senses that there's danger around it. It's not going to go, this is a really great time to lose fat. So instead, it's going to put more energy towards the protective mechanisms to keep you safe in that stressful environment. Gut issues can also drive cravings, irregular hunger, and food fear and elimination, which often leads women to chronically undereat, but also have nutrient gaps that stall fat loss. So, when you start realizing that food is triggering your gut, you're probably going to start cutting out food here, cutting out food there. Maybe you're going into meals very fearful of how your body is going to respond. And as a result, you start avoiding things. And when we start avoiding things, we start losing nutrients within our diet. And this can impact various different systems within the body. Malabsorption, meaning that when your gut is dysfunctional, it's going to have a hard time actually absorbing the nutrients that you eat. And ongoing inflammation can impair training recovery and lean mass retention. So if you expect to show up to the gym, give it your all, lift the heavy weights that you are told that you need to do in order to build muscle, and then recover from the stress of training, but your gut is not in full working order, all of that is going to be so much harder. And then finally, we have the hormone conversation because it's really important to know that when we're looking at our hormone health, a lot of times it comes from our gut health. So, gut dysfunction is often linked to sex hormone imbalances, such as estrogen related symptoms like low libido or cycle changes, which can show up as things like stubborn weight, PMS, and also mood swings. Ongoing gut stress can also contribute to keeping cortisol louder. So think of it this way, is when your body is stressed, cortisol is kind of like the alarm that goes off that tells your body, hey, we need to deal with this stressor. Now, if your body is in a constant state of stress because your gut is dysfunctional, then cortisol continues to alert the troops essentially. And this makes the body less willing to be again in that deep deficit because you have to think of it this way. When we are restricting calories, that is stress on the body. When we are in a stressful state, as I mentioned before, your body is not going to prioritize fat loss. It's going to prioritize survival. And so we need to keep in mind that cortisol is a major factor in that. And cortisol is a hormone that I'm sure many of you have already heard being thrown around. Finally, nutrient depletion from poor digestion and absorption and restrictive dieting can reduce key cofactors needed for things like thyroid and sex hormone metabolism. So if we're looking at our thyroid health, first of all, your thyroid is your energy regulator. So it really helps your body's metabolism do what it needs to do. So when we have lower thyroid production or conversion, we will actually see that we struggle to lose weight and that we retain fat. So if we want to target the thyroid and help it thrive, we need to make sure the gut is in check. Same from a sex hormone perspective. So if we're having miserable cycles, so we have whether it's cramping, PMS, mood changes, things that impact your ability to actually adhere to your diet, but also show up to the gym and show up for your daily life and feel good on a regular basis, that is also going to be impacted by your gut health. I'm just checking the chat really quick. but we're good. Okay. So what does restoring gut function actually look like? Now, one of the things that we need to kind of address is in the gut health space, there are going to be individuals who constantly talk about protocols. They're going to talk about super high level gut symptoms or gut cases that require very specific supplements and very specific elimination diets and all of these things. But we cannot forget that the basis for any protocol whatsoever is going to be the foundations. That is going to be nutrition, movement, sleep, and stress. And there are a lot of cases where I have clients who come into my coaching with years of gut dysfunction and very severe symptoms who never need to ultimately get into that specific protocol range because we tackle it with the foundational basics, and that alone with some supplement support makes them feel a whole world better. So keep in mind, if you guys are looking into getting gut support, if the provider that you're working with, whether it's a coach or whether it's a gut doctor or anyone like that, if they are not talking about things like nutrition, movement, sleep, and stress on a regular basis, and they're simply just throwing a bunch of supplements and a protocol at you, that is a red flag and you need to turn around and run away. And now I'm going to introduce you to another client of mine. This is Rachel. So Rachel is a really great case of the basics work. Now, she had IBS since the 6th grade. So that is a long time to be struggling with gut troubles. She tried it all. She tried removing foods. She tried seeing doctors. She tried getting diagnoses, the works, but she honestly just kind of lived life pretty miserably managing her gut symptoms. At one point, she was taking Zofran 3 times a day for gastroparesis. So if you're not familiar with that, basically she was feeling constant nausea. And as you can imagine, if you're feeling nauseous all the time, it's really, really hard to make sure that you're eating or that you're showing up in your day-to-day life or you're exercising and things like that. She also had a lot of fear around food because she just never knew how her stomach would react. She is a high level corporate working mom who would honestly just skip meals sometimes because if she was in back to back meetings and she didn't know how her stomach would respond to food, she couldn't afford to go running to the bathroom at any time to deal with her gut in response to the food that she was eating. She also came to me with this basically huge list of foods that she felt she could not eat because it worked against her when she started in my coaching. Now, what we did was we just began with the basics, eating slowly and mindfully, even in a high stress corporate environment. It was really important for her to know that perfection was not the goal, but for her to eat slowly and mindfully whenever she could. So we started with honestly 1 meal a day. We also replaced her daily DoorDash with home cooked meals because she was ordering out on a frequent basis. We started balancing her meals with protein and fiber. And then we also started incorporating daily movement with walks and strength training. Honestly, shout out to those at home, like in office treadmills, because she can just walk while she's on a meeting and fit it in despite working a 60, 70, 80-hour work week. And then we also worked on managing stress and improving her sleep habits. And for Rachel, now she's still working with me. Her symptoms are very rare, and when they do occur, she can usually identify what precisely caused it. So she has so much clarity on now how her gut actually responds to food and her environment and the works. She also no longer has fear with eating. Many of the foods that she thought she couldn't eat, she can now eat. So we shrunk that list from a big list to one thing, and that is cow's milk. We were able to identify she can tolerate up to a certain small amount. Beyond that, she truly does have a little bit of lactose intolerance, basically. But now, again, she has that clarity. She knows that that's truly what bothers her stomach and something that she needs to either avoid or keep at a minimum. So now what we're doing is we're focusing on building muscle through strength training. So she is doing my custom strength, custom train with confidence programming. And then as a bonus, we also improved her menstrual cycle. So she sent this message here to me in our chat where she had period cramps so bad her entire life that at one point she was taking maybe 10 Aleve a day just to manage the pain. And now she doesn't have to take Aleve because she barely has any cramps. And she was kind of shocked at how this was happening, despite the fact I talk about it all the time. But it truly can be amazing when all of a sudden you feel so much better and realize that you have the capacity to feel that way. So one of the things that I promised to you guys that you would get on this call is action steps that you can take to start feeling better today, because ultimately I want to help you and I want you to know what direction to actually take, because again, there's so much information out there. So where do we start? the number one thing I start every single one of my one-on-one clients with is eating mindfully. So a little bit of a crash course on your autonomic nervous system. We have our sympathetic nervous system, which many of you are familiar with as your fight or flight nervous system. Okay, so that is a bear is chasing you, adrenaline pumps up, you need to run away. Chances are you're probably not fighting the bear. Then we've got our parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest. So naturally, this is when our rhythms come down, we start to get into more of a restful state, heart rate comes down, blood flow is no longer flowing into the extremities, but rather towards our core, so our digestive system, and we can actually properly digest our food. Now, again, I know we're not running away from bears, but women traditionally, especially type A, overachieving women who are often juggling multiple things in their life, have a tendency to exist in chronic sympathetic states, and they're especially eating in those sympathetic states. So what I challenge my clients to do is sit at a table that's actually meant for eating, not your desk, not your couch, not anywhere else. You're also going to eat slowly. So you're going to chew your food thoroughly, like you're going to really grind it down, because that's where digestion starts, is in the mouth. And then you're also going to put your fork down between bites, because I don't know if you've ever recognized this, but if you're putting a fork full of food in your mouth before you've even finished your last forkful, yeah, we've all been there. So the next one's mindfulness, and this is arguably the most difficult thing for most women to do. The first one is going to be limit distractions. So we're going to put away our phone, we're not going to watch TV, we're not going to work while we eat, et cetera, et cetera. The idea is to bring awareness to your meal itself and start to ask yourself, how is this food making me feel? So we have to actually get in touch with, how hungry am I leading into the meal? How much food do I actually want? As I'm eating that meal, how is it feeling? Am I actually getting satisfied? Am I enjoying the meal? Is it feeling good in my body? And how full am I getting? Because then we want to also recognize when we feel full so we can properly stop eating. Sounds simple, but a lot of us struggle with overeating. And when we overeat, we often feel bloated or uncomfortable, right? And then also paying attention to symptoms post-meal. Again, we want to bring awareness around how is our gut responding and what could potentially be setting us off if we are having symptoms. The second one is going to be the balanced plate formula. I live and die by this formula. All of my meals are based off of this formula. Truly, this is a photo on the right of a meal that I made. And if you guys are familiar with my Instagram or my Meal Prep Monday newsletter, you'll know that my plate looks like this a lot of the time. So what we're going to do is we're going to start building your plate with this formula, starting off with protein. So amino acids maintain intestinal lining integrity and digestive enzyme production. So it's not just for your muscles, but it's also for your gut health. Now, protein needs often tend to be a little bit higher than most women can comfortably get in, and protein tends to be very satisfying, meaning it fills you up. So it's best eaten when it's actually spread out across the day rather than trying to have a huge portion all at once. So this is why we want to make sure that it's kind of the center part of each meal that we consume. Carbohydrates are going to be the next one. I know there's a lot of fear around carbohydrates, but really what we have to, understand is that, one, carbohydrates are your body's preferred source of energy, as well as your brain's preferred source of energy. So if you guys are feeling kind of low on energy in your workouts or in your day-to-day and you're avoiding carbs, bingo, that's why. Now, this is also going to be your primary source of fiber. And I don't want you to overthink how to get fiber in. I did put some metrics in here where we're trying to aim for about 14 grams per 1,000 calories that we eat per day. But really, the way I try to simplify it is I tell my clients, aim for about 1 to 3 fiber containing sources per meal. And the carbohydrate of choice can oftentimes lend itself to that. Now, the second thing that you're going to build your plate with is produce. This can either be fruit or vegetable, or both, if you choose, whatever you want. But fruits and vegetables are both carbohydrates, mind you. So they do contribute to that macronutrient, but they get their own special category. So that way we make sure that they're frequently on our plate, because the average American underconsumes produce within their diet. Produce is absolutely essential, not only for helping you get your fiber needs, but also various different micronutrients. So think of it this way: eat the rainbow. The more colors that you have on your plate, the more micronutrient access you have. Now, for my gut sensitive women, vegetables and fruit can be a little bit testy. So you might not want to jack up how much you're eating in a single meal by a lot. So see on my side of my plate, you're probably estimating about a quarter to maybe a third of my plate is covered by vegetables. And for a lot of my gut health queens, that might actually be a good serving size. Also, with vegetables, raw vegetables can often be irritants for individuals with gut dysfunction, but cooked vegetables can be easier to digest. So you guys can kind of navigate it that way. And then finally, fats. Fats are kind of like the hidden gem. You're not always going to see them on your plate, but they should be included anyway. So there are certain fats that can contribute to fiber, not all, but things like nuts, seeds, and avocado can help boost it. But generally speaking, omega-3s within your diet help modulate inflammation within the gut. Now, if you're looking at my plate to the side, where does the fat exist? So you're going to see a little bit of fat in the turkey that I used. So those are turkey meatballs. Then also some oil that is used within the process of cooking. So again, you're not always going to see fats on your plate, but you can kind of mentally go, okay, I know that they're there. And then the last one is going to be meal spacing. So we really want to make sure that we are spacing our meals out appropriately to support the digestive process, because this is a process that takes time. Not when you eat, your body has to obviously digest the meal, but then also clear the stomach. And then over the course of a few hours, as this is happening, your hunger signals will reset, rise again, and kind of signal, hey, it's time for that next meal. On average, this process can take around every 3 to 4 hours. So that is about what I recommend my clients do, is eat about every 3 to 4 hours. Whether you're eating a meal or a snack, and I like to call snacks mini meals because I don't love the traditional snack where we just grab like a piece of fruit or a protein bar, but rather something that is actually balanced with protein, carbs, produce, and then maybe a little bit of fat. So you're creating this mini meal that's smaller on a scale, but you're still hitting your main needs. Grazing or snacking throughout the day, so if you find yourself eating every like 1 to 2 hours or so, basically puts your body in a constant digestive mode, and you can never really reset that digestive cycle. So essentially your digestion is always under, I don't want to call it stress, but it's always working. So instead, we want to make sure, again, that we're eating about every 3 to 4 hours. If we push it beyond that, it's not inherently a bad thing, but what's usually happening, you're getting hangry, you're going to be irritable, you're going to go into your meal super, super hungry. Chances are you're going to eat too fast, you're going to eat too much, and then you're going to feel crappy. First meal of the day, I also recommend having within 1 hour of waking. If you do not have hunger signals within the first hour of your day, this is a sign of dysfunction. This is a sign that there's something going on that we need to dig deeper into. So oftentimes when my clients don't necessarily have those hunger signals, we do train their body to get those hunger signals by planning a meal within the first hour of their day. Also think of it this way, your digestion operates on a circadian rhythm. So it's actually going to work better during, let's call it daylight hours, right? Because I know that we're still existing and eating in some evening hours as well by the time we hit dinner, but it is going to function better in the earlier parts of the day. Last meal of the day, we typically want to have a cutoff of about 2 to 3 hours before bed, if possible. I know for some of us, our schedules just don't allow it, myself being one of them. But if you do find that eating a heavier meal prior to bed keeps you up or hinders your sleep quality, this is something that we should look at. So I'm going to introduce you to one last and final client, because this is going to be a client case where we do have a history of gut dysfunction. The foundations were not something that worked, and we needed deeper support. So with Taylor, she had worked with coaches in the past, primarily macro coaches who helped her with weight loss and body composition in the work. So she knew how to eat healthy. She knew how to meet her protein goals, and she wasn't restricting. She was eating her carbs. But the problem is that she had such a long history of gut dysfunction, again, going back to childhood experiences, and she was never really able to get any proper answers for that. She had gone to doctors and tried to seek out more support. She tried to get answers, and really she just left with a diagnosis of IBS. And her doctor kind of said, well, you can try drinking some kombucha and try the low FODMAP diet. Now, the low FODMAP diet is admittedly pretty difficult for an individual to execute on their own with absolutely zero resources. But Taylor tried it. She tried to do it herself, and it was really, really tough for her. And there was no real process. There was no support locked in for her. So she kind of gave up, moved on, and just thought that she was going to be miserable. So eventually she finally said, I don't need to live my life this way. She signed up for one-on-one coaching. And what was different this time around? First of all, we did mindset work pre low FODMAP diet. So when she came on, we didn't really need to work on a ton of the foundations. Again, she knew how to eat, but she got on a call with me and she kind of just broke down crying. And she was like, I'm honestly so scared to do the low FODMAP diet because I've done it before. It felt so restrictive. I know it's going to impact my life in a pretty big way. And so I calmly said, okay, I want you to list out every single one of your fears and we're going to work through every single one. So that way, when she got off that call, she felt so much more confident with approaching the low FODMAP diet and her gut protocol. We also continued to work on stress management tools because that was one of the foundational basics that she didn't really have locked in. She found mindful eating to be an absolute game changer for her. That really kickstarted her process for her. And then, of course, we also did tailor supplements for each phase of her protocol. So the repair phase and also the reintroduction phase and the works. We also did a intentional reintroduction. So when she had done the low FODMAP diet first on her own, she just kind of went back to eating as she was before, and there was no process to it. But instead, what we did, we added one thing at a time. We saw how her body responded to it, so that way we could really identify what she was able to tolerate going forward and what she wasn't able to tolerate. Now, for some individuals, I do want to be honest about this. Sometimes the end goal is not full healing. I know that for Rachel, she didn't have to go down a full gut protocol and she feels so much better and she can eat everything. But there are a lot of clients who, through the reintroduction phase, find that there are still foods that set off their gut. But the key is that we bring you clarity on what actually sets off your gut and what doesn't. So that way you know how to navigate food moving forward. Sometimes your body just needs a little bit more time. Sometimes it is more of a lifelong elimination. So for Taylor specifically, we identified that she was able to tolerate gluten in small amounts, but if it built up over time, so she was eating it frequently, her symptoms would kick back up again. So one of the things that we are potentially pursuing in the future for her is a celiac test to see if that is something that is a little bit more serious that she needs to be aware of. But today, she has successfully reintroduced most foods, currently managing her results long term. Her flares are far and few between. They're nowhere near as severe as they used to be. And when they do happen, she knows exactly what to do about it. Her hormonal cycles are also consistent and pain free. So before, she used to feel this massive energy downshift a whole week leading up to her cycle and during her cycle. So I'm talking like 1 to 2 weeks out of every 4 weeks. She felt crappy. She felt like she couldn't lift heavy enough weight in the gym, and she had to completely change her workouts according to where she was at in her cycle. Now her energy is way more consistent. She can lift heavy across her cycle. She feels great doing it. And her cramps and PMS are no longer a major issue. So what I wanted to do with each one of these client stories is kind of showcase what the process actually looks like, what results can look like, how gut dysfunction essentially can be helped or be healed or restore your gut function. So that way you understand what is physically possible for you if this is something that you relate to. So if you guys have listened to each client story and been like, oh, okay, like that sounds like something I need, I do offer this within my one-on-one coaching. So this entails a deep dive into your personal health history, biofeedback, labs, and also more. So that way we develop a fully comprehensive plan for you that is completely individualized. It is high touch guidance. So it is not going to be, here's what to do. Now, good luck. Hope you make it. But rather, I'm going to support you with building those foundational habits and mastering the basics. I provide supplement recommendations that are not a one size fits all, process, but also intended to support your specific physiology. Also, I do deeper protocols when necessary for restoring gut function. I will never put a client through a gut protocol if it's not something they need, but I make sure that they are set up for success if that's the path we have to go down. You also have access to labs and testing for building a better understanding of your health and symptoms. And then I also do a lot of support with medical advocacy. So there are cases with some of my clients where they do need medical support. I am not anti-doctor. I am not anti-Western medicine, but I do know that it can be really, really difficult to get the tests that you need, to get the labs that you need, to get the diagnoses that you need from your doctor when you're navigating the medical system. So oftentimes I help my clients prepare for their appointments to make sure that they are citing the proper symptoms. Recently, I did a full health history for a client so that way she could bring it into her doctor and fill them in on everything she's experienced over the years. But that support is instrumental in getting the care that you deserve if you do need more medical support. And then at the end of the day, you get a plan that's built for your lifestyle and capacity. When Rachel came into my coaching, she was so worried that she wouldn't be able to actually execute anything that I told her to do. And when we got into it, right, even just from a mindful eating perspective, I knew that a corporate working mom was not going to be able to eat every single meal mindfully. So we started with one meal a day. And that's kind of the idea of what we're doing for you is we're making sure that the plan fits your lifestyle and your capacity. And I primarily work on gut restoration, hormone function, but also weight loss, body recomposition, and the works. So I do have a special coaching offer for those who are attending and basically anybody within this time frame. So if you guys want to sign up for coaching in the near future, you get $350 as a diagnostic credit to use strategically if needed. So some of you might want to move forward on getting a GI map. So if you do have gut dysfunction and you want to dig deeper into what's actually going on, you can use it towards that. Otherwise, we can use it towards serum labs such as a hormone panel or whatnot, or a custom lab panel built out for your needs. I also have my Train with Confidence subscription-based programming. So this will be my preset program, but essentially you guys, based on the package that you decide to go through, you do get a certain number of weeks for free. So in order to qualify for these bonuses specifically, all you have to do is submit an application for coaching by May 23rd. So I want to get really clear on something. Just because you submit an application doesn't mean you're putting money down today. It doesn't mean that you're formally signing up for coaching. It simply locks in your spot for these bonuses. Afterwards, we will schedule a call one-on-one so that way we can actually build out what you're struggling with, what you need, and whether or not my coaching can help you. At the end of the call, I want you to know what the steps forward are, whether it is working with me or whether it's finding help with another provider, whatever that may be. If you guys do have follow-up questions, if you probably follow me on Instagram at Coach Diana Leigh. I'm also on YouTube. I'm also on TikTok. Same name. I also send emails, which you guys probably have access to now that you signed up for this. Feel free to hit reply. Feel free to send me a DM. Any questions that you guys have as a follow-up, I am more than happy to talk about. I love talking, so I love talking to people. I love sharing this information. I love doing whatever I can to help people better understand their bodies and their health. So thank you again for being on this live. If you guys are watching the replay, thank you for taking the time to do so. And other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your evening.